Following up from the video we just watched, one key thing I want those substances impact on us. Focusing on drugs will be only for knowledge sake and awareness sake, because drugs are not the problem. In any way, drugs are not the problem. If drugs are the problem, then people who use alcohol on a daily basis and never become addicted are there. People who use heroin, people who use crack cocaine, people who smoke cannabis all their lives without having a problem are there. But we've seen the video of how the brain is structured and the relationship between the prefrontal cortex, the midbrain, and especially the limbic system. Now, I'm going to try and focus on the limbic system now, because that's where a lot of changes happen. We have natural reward. Whoever created this machine for us have created the reward pathway. Sex happens to be the highest natural reward. When you have sex, you get 100% dopamine. Just take the dopamine as a reward system. When you eat and you drink water, it's about 60%. There is a reason why sex is the highest. It's not just for you to enjoy sex as it is. It's mainly for procreation, to continue humanity, to continue life. And that is why sex is not painful. If sex was painful, nobody would want to have children. Even though childbearing is painful, but the moment the baby comes out, the reward that it creates from seeing that baby, the chemical changes in the woman's body, makes it worthwhile. That's why you see women have 1, 2, 3 children. And that's why you see people get engaged in having sexual intercourse for procreation. Just like it's a reward, this can also go out of hand and become an addiction. Why is food 60%? For sustenance. If we are going to live in this world, if we are going to, as we procreate, if we are going to feed and protect ourselves, safety, then we have to eat. So if foods were like gravels, nobody will want to eat, because all your teeth, your mouth will be sore. But food is made palatable for you to enjoy and get the nutrients to survive. Water is to nourish your system. If there's no water, thirst, we'll all die. So once we are populating the world, then we need to feed the world and nourish our system. So whoever created this machine made sure of this balance. And then the third one, which is significant again, is social interaction. How we interact with one another. We create communities. Let's go back to the periods of the cavemen. How they come together as hunter-gatherers. They come together, put their skills together to go and hunt for animals, kill the animal, use the skin for clothing, store some of the food, and help one another in building a community. You come together, build one person's house, go again and build the second person's house. The farmer will go to the farm. There was no currency then, there's trade by barter. Now let's bring that to modern day, when we look at relationship within our family, immediate family and extended families. No matter how unhappy you are or something is going on, if you attend a family gathering where some aunties, uncles, and relatives that you've not seen in a long time turn up, you'll forget about whatever is going on for you at that moment, because you'll remember some auntie who dances funny, opportunity to gossip about your cousins, your nephews, your nieces. All these things makes you release dopamine, the reward system. And once you enjoy it, it reinforces it. All of these things, because the dopamine we release is as a result of a reward, of something that we do. So it helps us to repeat it. The problem comes not when there is no lack of reward. No. Because even though I stopped at social interaction 40%, you can even go lower. You release dopamine from everything you do that you get pleasure from. Even looking at a guy in your uni or at your workplace and thinking, he's a handsome guy, you release dopamine. It might be 5%, it might be 4%, it might be 6%. You see a beautiful girl, say, wow, she's so nice. You release dopamine. You do something challenging, you overcome, you are happy you've done it, you succeed, you release dopamine. We do that every day. It's just that the level differs at different functions that we do. So, what creates a problem for us is when we disrupt this natural order. Because the moment we disrupt this natural order, then the brain is no longer functioning properly. The limbic system, where all this action takes place, where you release dopamine, you release serotonin, noradrenaline and all this stuff, then impacts on the midbrain. And the midbrain is the one that is linked to your, what is it called now? To your spinal cord, straight to your body, where it sends sensation, it sends information back to the brain and translates it. So what happens to us when we use drugs? Number one, nobody, very rarely, does anybody start using psychoactive substances, any psychoactive substance, with the intention or the thought of saying, I'm going to become an addict. I want to be a junkie. I'm going to get addicted. No, we don't do that. Nobody knowingly. It's always, somebody or yourself starts to use a substance. That substance, whatever reward you get from it, reinforces you to do it over and over again. Now, use does not automatically become dependent or addiction. No. You go from using the substances, and there are about 4 stages. Initial stage is when you are experimenting. You come from the experimental stage. Oh, my friend says this is nice, or I tried it and I liked it, or I tried it, I don't like it. Thank God, most young people, adolescents, teenagers, we all go through that stage where we try something and we don't like it, we leave it. Majority of kids will try a lot of stuff and they won't like it, they will stop using it. Some of us will like it. After the experimentation, we then move to the next stage that is called the active seeking stage. Once we start actively seeking it, now we have found some pleasure in it, and it has disrupted this 100%, 60%, and 40% that we are seeing. So each of these stages, when we start to use substances, and then when we go from use to abuse, and then we go to start misusing before we become dependent, is a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight. The habit is being reinforced by the pleasure, the level of pleasure that we receive. And this is consistent with these phases. If you look at these 4 phases, we have the experimentation phase. Experimentation phase is when you first try it out. Either through peer pressure, in a social setting, you are not pressured into doing it, you are just out of curiosity, you want to try it. So you experiment with it. The good thing is that most people, or most young people, because addiction is more of a teenage and adolescence problem, because of the changes, the biological changes going on in our body as teenagers or adolescents. They experiment with it, but most people will stop it. Those who did not stop it, who like the feeling, and who wants to repeat the feeling and continue the feeling, they go to a different stage of actively seeking it. And a typical example is cannabis use, which is one of the most common substance that we use in this part of the world. First time that we will try cannabis, we will not even know how to roll it most of the time. If somebody is already rolled, somebody gave it to you, you don't even know where to buy it from. You don't know where to get it. Majority of the time. So you get it, they give it to you, which again is very risky because there might be other things lined in it. So you always get your cannabis wrapped in a spliff. So you get the spliff, you like it, you keep going back to the person who introduced you to it, and you'll try it. You don't like it, or you don't like the feeling, you stop using it. Which majority of young people do. But those who choose to like it, then we'll go to the next stage. Now, because of how it makes you feel, because it has disrupted that natural reward order, instead of 100% reward that you get from the highest natural reward, which is sex, now the cannabis is making you release about 1,000%. So look at the gap. What your body is used to before is 100%. And we'll watch the video of how the reward pathways work. Now you are getting 1,000% reward. So you will start seeking it. You are not getting enough. You can't wait for the person who introduced you to it to bring it because you have to share it with them. And then they have to help you to roll it. So now you start seeking your own supply. You'll be going to find out where you can buy. When you find where you can buy, then you find how you can roll it. A lot of people, as they are growing up, they are forced to learn how to wrap the cannabis themselves. Because if you don't do it, they tend to waste more of the cannabis, buying cigarettes, removing the tobacco in the cigarette and trying to fill it out, which does not burn well. So at the stage of active seeking, a lot of changes happen. A lot of rituals, what we call rituals, are acquired to help sustain the habit. And once they settle into this, they know where to get it from, they know how to wrap it. Now they move on to the preoccupation. Now this preoccupation, this is when it starts to affect the social context, education, relationship at home. If it was a child who used to go to church with parents, will start avoiding going to church with the parents. If it was a child who is social, will start isolating themselves. They don't want to mix with the family. School, focus in school becomes a problem. Attention span becomes small. Whatever function or whatever preoccupation they are doing, they're only thinking about where to get their next leaf, how to use it safely without being caught because it's an illegal substance, and then they repeat it. At this stage, families and parents who are observant will see changes, difference in friends. They change the kind of friends they move with. Their old friends who are not using drops off. They seek new friends who are the same cannabis users. And their grade starts to fall. They start to get into trouble. If they used to come home on time before, they start coming home late. Issue of truancy, reports from school starts to come in. And what skips most family is mental health problems. The issue of anxiety and depression starts from here during the preoccupation. And it gets worse when they are now dependent or addicted. And this is when it shows and becomes a problem. And this is important, especially for families where there is a genetic predisposition to mental illness, either on the maternal side or on the paternal side. And this is why it's dangerous to just say because your friends are smoking and cannabis, you want to join them in smoking cannabis. Because you don't know their own genetic history. And if you don't know your own genetic history, then you had better be careful. Because if there is a predisposition of mental illness in your family, paternal or maternal, then you are going to wake up the dragon. And you might not be able to restrain that dragon by the time you wake it up. So far, any question? Excellent. Okay. Let's go back now to watching the video and look at the reward system, how all this dopamine, serotonin, and how they change and how they impact, and why they impact so much from 100 to 1,000, and even when it's methamphetamine to about 3,500 when it comes to methamphetamine.
The system contains the brain's reward circuit or pathway. The reward circuit links together a number of brain structures that control and regulate our ability to feel pleasure. Feeling pleasure motivates us to repeat behaviors. When the reward circuit is activated, each individual cell in the circuit relays.
How do we activate the reward pathway, which is the limbic system? The natural way to do that is the sex, food and water and social interaction. And once we activate it with these activities, the other parts of the body recognizes it. They feel the pleasure. And that is why when if you have been in the United States for 10 years without coming to Ghana, and you didn't have, maybe you like Wachi, which is a very good example. You haven't been to Ghana at all, and you are not in any state where there is a Ghanaian community. So you've not had Wachi since 10 years ago that you left Ghana. On your way back to Ghana, this is where the other parts of your brain starts to work. The reward pathway, the moment you get off at Kotoka International Airport and you smell Wachi in the air, there's a restaurant and they are making Wachi there, that smell will be heightened for you because you have a relationship with it, with that same Wachi before. Once that smell comes and you recognize the smell, this is the smell of Wachi, automatically your senses, the limbic system, you start to salivate. That's the other part of you starts to salivate. You feel hungry. Yeah, you crave the food. You want to eat it again because it's a long time that you've not eaten it. So what you do is you follow your smell and you tell the driver, instead of taking me home, take me to the Wachi place where they are selling that Wachi. You get there, they serve you a bowl of Wachi. Yummy. You activate the reward pathway. The moment you take the first spoon, taste buds, pleasure, relief, you relieve that enjoyment. But the good thing about it is that while you are eating that and you are releasing dopamine, that dopamine is proportionate to your body, to your system. So it doesn't overflow like it does when you do something else. So we know when you eat the Wachi now, you're going to reduce about 60% dopamine. So
chemical signals. The small gap between the sending and receiving cells is called the synapse. In the reward circuit, dopamine neurons release the neurotransmitter dopamine. The released dopamine molecules travel across the synapse.
Now, this is you eating Wachi. The Wachi has made you release these dopamine molecules. Already, there is a receptor in your brain that recognizes the feeling you get from Wachi, so it stimulates it. But it stimulates it proportionately. 60%, not too much, it will go back. See?
And link up with proteins called dopamine receptors on the surface of the receiving cell.
You see,
everything
goes back. Once it binds, you enjoy your Wachi, it goes back. No withdrawal, no anxiety, no nothing.
Some dopamine molecules re-enter the sending cell via dopamine transporters and can be re-released.
You see, so the dopamine transporter takes this dopamine back to the storage. Once they're in the storage, they stay there and waiting for another time when you will stimulate them through an activity. Now, that 40%, again, if you're going to release more, the highest you can release, is if you have sex. If you have sex, this is what happens. You see, look at how much you are releasing, much more,
releases a large
amount at once, and that is the 100%. But the dopamine transporter as well comes out as much as is needed to take the dopamine you have released back. That is why people are able to have sex, reach orgasm, and not feel like, finish, I'm tired for the day. You get up, if you are going to work, you go to work. If you are going to do any household activity, you do household activity. It doesn't make you useless, it doesn't keep you there all day, because it does not overwhelm you. Even though no matter how heightened the feeling you get and how deep the orgasm you have is, you are still able to function normally. You can get up and go and take transport, go to work, do anything with nobody knowing that you've just had sex. You've just released so much dopamine.
Sex.
Everything goes back to normal.
Surges in response to natural rewards.
And then you give birth to your child, you see your offspring, your lineage continue. Humanity is saved.
This process, contributing to unhealthy behaviors and consequences.
Now that we've seen this, let us now look at cocaine. And now, before I talk about cocaine, I want us to establish one fact. Cocaine is not the problem, like most people and most school of thoughts. Cocaine is not the problem. The coca leaf is a natural plant, just like the marijuana leaf, the cannabis plant. It's a natural plant. It's medicinal. Coca leaf is medicinal. In the Inca tribe in Colombia, there's a tribe that the way we put when we are doing adoring, the natural, not the Christian adoring or the Muslim adoring, I'm not looking at religion now, the natural adoring, African culture, there are certain things you put down for adoring. Maybe it's palm oil, maybe it's salt, there's sugar, and when they pray, talk about the child and all these things, they take oil, touch the tongue, they take salt, touch the tongue. That is our own culture, it's our own way. It's the same way the Inca tribe, when they are having a function, adoring, marriage, anything, they have coca leaves that they tie and put on the table. Guests come, you take your coca leaf, you chew. Nobody has any problem. They are going to work on their farm, they have coca leaves that they put, if you don't want to chew it, you fold it, you put it on the side of your cheek, and they chew it throughout. They are working on the farm. So they don't get tired, they don't get overwhelmed, and they don't go and start stealing and start acting addicted. No, it's a natural thing for them. And this is why, again, it's a bit political, because when you look at the United States saying, having the war against drugs in Colombia and in South America, spending millions, in fact billions of dollars fighting the drug cartels. The drug cartels bring not coca leaves, they bring cocaine that has been mashed. The coca leaf has been mashed and mixed with HCl, hydrochloric acid, to form a paste. And when that paste is formed, they pack it, put it in a muslin, and then hang it so that the liquid will drip off and it becomes dry. Now it is the dryness that is the powder that they ship to the United States and to the West. And this is what the West and what we see as cocaine today. And because of the hydrochloric acid in it, it's an impurity. That is why the cocaine you get in the streets of America, in the streets of Ghana, is not as pure as from Colombia, where it's coming from. Because pure cocaine, you'll never even get 50% or 40% here, because people keep cutting cocaine with different compounds, with different elements. So that is why they are so addictive. They become addictive because of the chemicals we add to it. The same thing with opium. The poppy leaf is a plant, it's a natural plant. The coca leaf is a natural plant. The cannabis leaf is a natural plant. Now we are now doing synthetic cannabis. Because with cannabis, we have there are about 66 different properties in cannabis. But the significant one for us is the THC and the CBD. This is tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidol. Now, there is a particular one of this tetrahydrocannabinol. We have different types of THC in the cannabis plant. The most dangerous one, though, is the delta 9. Is the delta 9 THC, the delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol. And there are different kinds of CBDs as well. But this delta 9 is the psychoactive property in cannabis. That is why the local weed, people don't want to buy the local weed because the strength, the potency of the delta 9 is not high. So you can take 1 split, 2 split, it will not blow your brains out, it will not be high. In fact, it is higher in CBD, which is the health, the medicinal aspect. The CBD, which is the medicinal aspect, is the one that helps with glaucoma, the one that helps with arthritis, the one that helps with patients with HIV, to prevent nausea and to stimulate appetite. It is the CBD. The local cannabis that you grow in Volta region is rich in this, but very low in this. Unfortunately, our synthetic cannabis, which we are getting now, and because of the useless war on drug, we are destroying the cannabis from Volta region. NACOC will go there, destroy their farm, burn everything there. So, and our borders are porous, all West Coast border porous. So synthetic cannabis flows in from all over the world. And now you will get drugs like skunk, hydro, black widow, now let's talk about hybrid, which is your own interest. The problem with hybrid is an evolution from skunk. Skunk started in 1977, the first skunk. The first skunk is a combination of these 3 cannabis plants: the Mexican, the Afghan, and the Thai. These 3 different cannabis plants have different properties. One is very leafy, the Mexican. The Afghan is it grows very tall and quick. The Thai is very high in THC and potent. So what they did was they put this together to become skunk number 1. So if the natural one has a THC, delta 9 THC content of 0.2%, they made sure that this skunk number 1 have 1.3, 1.8%. Now, skunk has evolved so much now that we have this hybrid, we have black widow, we have hydro, and then nowadays we have loud. In fact, we have Canadian loud, and then we have Colorado. All these are part of hybrids. Because with hybrid, instead of the natural one 0.2%, we are getting hybrids, Colorado and all these things, with the delta 9 THC in all these synthetic and especially the hybrid ones, loud, Colorado, and all these things. We are getting as high as 17 to 25%. And that is the psychoactive part of it. So that is why now, when Professor Osei in Ghana said it in the paper some years ago that cannabis is causing mental illness, that more of our young people are becoming mentally ill. They are seeing that at the psychiatric hospitals in Ghana. Professor Hart was here. We had invited Professor Carl Hart here. He responded in the newspaper. I still have the newspaper cutting. It is not cannabis. It is the synthetic cannabis. Because our borders are porous. It is the synthetic cannabis that is causing this problem for us. Because as a developing brain, a young brain, you take this synthetic cannabis, it can induce. It does not cause. It can induce. So this is associated with mental health problems or mental illness. So we need to look at the difference between people who are using opium, natural opium, coca leaf, and natural weed. Some of us have uncles, relatives, who maybe they are Rasta men and they've been using cannabis since you were young. Now you are old, they are still using it. They have not developed mental illness. It is because they are smart enough not to get into this synthetic cannabis. They have been using the local weed, which has the seed. And even the local weed itself is not for everybody. Of all addiction problems, only 13% of people who use drugs and alcohol will become dependent on the drug and alcohol. The remaining 77 will not have a problem. They will use safely, they will use for the rest of their life, they won't have any mental health problem, they won't have any social problem. They will go to work, they will be responsible, they will even lead. But there are 13% of us that our brain can just not handle any psychoactive substance. And that as well goes for this cannabis. So that is the problem with the hydro and the synthetic cannabis that we are buying in shops and that is being sold here. Because now, even in Ghana, to get weed is very difficult. You call your dealer has no weed. It's synthetic, different ones that they will give you. And that is what is ravaging Ghana, Nigeria, and all these West African countries. So, now, let's go back to our video and observe what do we see here that we did not see in the natural reward. The good thing is it's going to repeat the natural rewards to you here before it tells you about the
Deep within the brain
drugs.
is a set of structures called the limbic system. The limbic system contains the brain's reward circuit or pathway. The reward circuit links together a number of brain structures that control and regulate our ability to feel pleasure. Feeling pleasure motivates us to repeat behaviors. When the reward circuit is activated, each individual cell in the circuit relays electrical and chemical signals.
Again,
The small
remember,
gap.
activated, the natural reward is activated: food, sex, social contact, family interactions, being happy, being with your immediate family, extended family. That is what activates it.
Between the sending and receiving cells is called the synapse. In the reward circuit, dopamine neurons release the neurotransmitter dopamine. The released dopamine molecules travel across the synapse and link up with proteins called dopamine receptors on the surface of the receiving cell. When dopamine binds to the exterior of the dopamine receptor, this causes proteins attached to the interior part of the receptors to carry the signal onward within the cell. Some dopamine molecules re-enter the sending cell via dopamine transporters and can be
See, after it has stimulated the receptors, it can go back. Once it's activated, either through food, through sex, through social interaction, everything comes in, it stimulates or activates the receptor, and then it goes back quietly.
When a reward is encountered, the presynaptic cell releases a larger amount of dopamine in a sudden burst. Dopamine transporters will then quickly remove the excess. Dopamine surges in response to natural rewards help the brain learn and adapt to a complex world. However, drugs are able to hijack this process, contributing to unhealthy
This is where I want you to
behaviors
pay attention,
and consequences. When someone first uses cocaine, the drug quickly enters the brain, where it blocks the transporters on the presynaptic cell. Since dopamine cannot re-enter the...
Do you notice what is different now? What is it? When you take cocaine, it blocks the dopamine transporter from going back here into the nucleus accumbens or the storage, where in the natural reward, there's no cocaine, there's nothing. It just activates the receptor and it goes back.
Synaptic cell, it begins to accumulate in the synapse, where it can reach abnormally high levels and remain there much longer than usual. The postsynaptic cell becomes hyperactivated, which produces a feeling of euphoria.
Now, this is where we get our high. Once the cocaine, that's the white substance, block the uptake pump, and this becomes hypersensitive, the dopamine remains here. And once this remains hypersensitive, then that is where we get the euphoria. And with cocaine, we are talking about less than 6 minutes of pleasure. And now, we have a problem. We said natural reward, 100%. Now, with this, we have gone to 2,500. And that is why people who are addicted to drugs don't even think about sex, don't think about food, don't think about social interaction, because it doesn't stimulate any kind of pleasure for you anymore. Food is not pleasurable, sex is not pleasurable. Put a cocaine addict and Miss World in a room naked. He will rather go and sell the Miss World clothes and keep her naked in the room, go and sell the clothes to get high. Because the threshold has moved so massively. And one of the reasons why cocaine and crack cocaine is so high is because they do one thing. The substances, they block. That one block. But there's a reason why methamphetamine is even much higher than this. Methamphetamine, if you are going to take it, you take it about 3,500%. There is a special reason. We'll see if we'll pick it up when we watch the methamphetamine one.
And pleasure, making a person want to repeat the experience of taking the drug.
Now this is where an addict will go buy the cocaine, come in, use the cocaine, and within minutes, he's going back again to get another one. And there's no money, you wouldn't mind going to steal, going to borrow, because of that sensation, that feeling. He wants to keep repeating it over and over again. He never gets satisfied. These are a neuron, but these are neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are what sends messages, electrical messages, information from the body to the brain. That's the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The communication between these two systems is affected by these neurons and these neurotransmitters. Cannabis in particular, if you start cannabis at an early stage, cannabis creates potholes in these neural pathways. This is where individuals cannot focus in school. It affects memory, they can't retain information because they have started early and the brain is still developing, and the neurons or the neurotransmitters is like an electrical highway, has potholes, so it can't speed up the way it used to. It's supposed to speed up.
Like buying drugs or cigarettes. Dopamine also goes to the prefrontal cortex, where with the help of an amino acid called glutamate, rich visualizations that cue cravings are conjured. Think images of drug paraphernalia, sex, or a bottle of booze. Then there's the amygdala, where the dopamine causes neurons here to be stimulated by learned emotional responses, like rich, leisure-coded memories. So what happens when drugs artificially flood these pathways with dopamine? For one thing, the rush can rewire your brain to want more drugs, and thus create addiction. But it turns out different drugs interact with the reward system in unique and interesting ways. Cocaine, for example, blocks dopamine transporters,
You see, this is exactly what you've just watched. That's cocaine molecules blocking the receptors. Now let's see what the other drugs, how they do it differently. And hence why the effect from each drug is very unique, even though they all go to stimulate the limbic system. But each drug has its own particular effect.
Prevents the removal of excess dopamine from synapses. Methamphetamine, on the other hand, floods the terminals of neurons, displacing dopamine.
You can go on a 3-day trip on methamphetamine. It's extremely addictive. And that is why ravaging in America, you see a whole street, a whole town, families addicted, in a one family addicted to meth. Because the intensity of meth addiction is one of the strongest. It goes right inside to go and flush out the dopamine. No other drug does that, only meth. Now let's look at heroin.
Blocks dopamine inhibitors, causing synapses to flood with dopamine without restraint. The good?
You see, heroin blocks the inhibitors. Can you see the receptors? So now you feel like you're not, and this is why with heroin you feel like you're in a cocoon. You feel so chilled. And somebody who takes heroin is different from someone who takes a stimulant. Methamphetamine is a stimulant. Cocaine, crack cocaine, they're all stimulants. But when you take heroin, it's like taking an opioid. It calms the person down. It's always chill. They describe it as being being wrapped in a cotton ball. No pain, no, everything is just numb. And one thing with heroin is, and that is why when somebody is withdrawing from heroin, they have that itchy skin. Because it blocks the antihistamine in your skin layers. So it allows the dopamine to keep coming out, because to you are not feeling the sensation.
Inhibitors, causing synapses to flood with dopamine without restraint. The good news?
So it's not blocking, it's not going in, but it's not allowing the receptor to feel what it's supposed to feel. So it gets chilled out.
Addiction that have shown remarkable promise. Cocaine addicts have been able to
a basic understanding of one, our brain, two, how our brain is designed to function naturally, and how we use substances to change that dynamics. And then we will now look at the problem that the change can cause, the long-term and the short-term problem that the change can cause us. Inhibitory neuron. Now, when you say something is inhibiting you, definitely it's something stopping you from moving. For example, this is inhibiting me from coming to you. So if this is not in the way, I can freely come to you quickly. But once this is in my way, it's inhibiting me. So I want you to notice that inhibitory neuron, the role it plays in cannabis and the role it plays in alcohol.
Synaptic cell can reduce the amount of dopamine delivered to the synapse.
So that means it's inhibiting the quantity and the frequency of dopamine that is sent to the synapses before it goes to stimulate.
By releasing the neurotransmitter, GABA. Inhibitory GABA signals.
So GABA is an inhibitory chemical, and it plays a major role in cannabis and alcohol mainly.
Change in response to local brain activity, adjusting the amount of dopamine released by stimulated dopamine neurons. Endocannabinoids are neurotransmitters that can indirectly affect dopamine signals by
Now, most of these drugs that we talked about, including cannabis, we already have their receptors in our brain and some in our body. So you are introducing cocaine to your system, the receptor is already there. Heroin, the receptor is already there. Cannabis, the receptor is even more. There's even more cannabis receptor in the brain and in the body. Unlike the other ones, it's mainly in the brain. But with cannabis, you have in your brain and your body. And another thing about cannabis is not fat soluble like alcohol. You drink alcohol, you pee a lot. It goes out of your system. With cannabis, it stays in your system longer, depending on your metabolism. Because it doesn't dissolve. It stays in the fatty tissues. So the bigger you are, the fatter you are, the longer cannabis will continue to show in your urine sample. So these endocannabinoids, they are the natural one that God has put in your system. They help you with preventing nausea. They help to remind you of hunger. They do a lot of job in your system, but they do it accordingly without it being exaggerated. You don't even notice they are there, but they do the job cannabis does for you. For example, to help you rest, to make you active. They do exactly the same job.
Define the activity of other neurotransmitters such as GABA. Endocannabinoids, like dopamine, bind to specific receptor proteins located on the surface of some cells. Depending on its current level of activity, the presynaptic dopamine neuron can produce endocannabinoid molecules. These molecules bind to...
Now, this is an endocannabinoid molecule. If you look at the cannabis molecule, she got it right earlier by saying they make fake look real. It fakes itself and copies itself like the real thing. So it makes the fake one look real. It's like a master key. It needs to unlock this receptor to release dopamine.
Cannabinoid receptors on the adjacent GABA neuron, reducing the amount of GABA it releases.
So once the GABA is not controlled here, because once it binds with this receptor, it controls how much GABA, that is the inhibitory neuron, that is released. The inhibitory neuron, the quantity of the inhibitory neuron and the frequency of the inhibitory neuron determines how much dopamine is released. So the inhibitory neuron helps to regulate so that you don't release too much dopamine.
GABA neurons, in this way, boost the dopamine signal in the reward synapse. Endocannabinoid and other mechanisms that regulate dopamine activity help the brain develop, learn, adapt, and navigate a complex world. Endocannabinoids are molecules that closely resemble the main chemical in the cannabis plant, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC.
See, she specifically mentioned delta-9. That is the psychoactive. There are about 66 THC components, but there's one particular one, just one, delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. If that is not in a cannabis plant, if that is low, then the cannabis, most people will not want to smoke it. And it's completely different from the CBD.
THC is so similar to the brain's own endocannabinoids, such as anandamide or 2-AG. Smoking marijuana...
Now, this is where you make fake look real. This is fake. This is from a plant. This is real. This, you were born with it, is inside of you already. That is how God has created that key. To unlock the neuron receptors, to help GABA to regulate how much dopamine, doing it in a natural way, without overwhelming the brain, without overwhelming the body.
Directly affects the brain of the user. When someone smokes marijuana, THC molecules quickly reach the brain.
See, they look exactly like the endocannabinoid, and they are faster. They go quickly to act like they are the real key, and they open it before the endocannabinoids reach there, either anandamide or 2-AG.
There, THC competes with the brain's endocannabinoids to bind with cannabinoid
And they always
receptors
win.
on neurons that regulate dopamine activity. Among other effects, THC reduces the release of GABA in the striatum.
See?
This reduction
Reduces
in
GABA.
turn causes nearby dopamine neurons to release more dopamine.
Now, you
Increased
fire.
dopamine release produces the positive feelings or the marijuana high. Marijuana use can have far-reaching consequences in the user's brain. THC can activate cannabinoid receptors found throughout the brain, altering healthy communication within the brain and with the rest of the body. This can affect emotions, movement, learning, memory, and decision-making. Using marijuana frequently, especially during adolescence, overstimulates the reward system and can change the brain's actual wiring. Such use can lead to addiction and other mental illnesses, and even lower a person's IQ.
So the challenges with cannabis is that cannabis has much more receptor than heroin and cocaine. Cannabis has more than one receptor in the brain. There's from B1 to B12. Then it's the only drug as well that has receptors in the body. For example, cocaine and heroin has a particular receptor where it goes to. And that's why it was easier to develop medication to treat heroin. The heroin receptor can be this palm, for example. Now, if you smoke heroin, it goes to bind on this receptor. But if you smoke cannabis, it binds on multiple different receptors. So it's easier to either get an agonist or an antagonist medication to treat the heroin or the opiate use. So if you get an agonist, you get something like methadone. You take methadone as a substitute treatment. Methadone comes to cover the whole receptor area. So when you smoke real heroin, it doesn't even bind. You don't even get the kind of high you get. Instead, it will just be leaking more, adding more on the methadone, which can easily cause overdose because it's not binding. It can't bind. Methadone has covered the whole receptor area. Then they now went on to develop other drugs like Subutex, Suboxone, and now Bovidal. Now, Subutex is an antagonist. They don't block the whole surface. They block half of it. So what happens is if you now smoke heroin, it comes to bind on the other half. When it binds on the other half, the antagonist kicks it off. And once it kicks it off like that, you become sick. It triggers withdrawal. So it's easier to do that with a drug that has one receptor surface than something like cannabis that have multiple receptors in your brain and even in the body.